It's the first book in history to number the points. So you kind of read it with lung 5 or something like that, where you've got Deadman beside you, and then you look at that and you look at the indications, and you're trying to think, how did they form these functions by looking at these indications?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you're a student and you're sick of just being spoon-fed something and you really want to know a bit more, then this sounds like this is the kind of acupuncture text you need to get your hands on. And especially if you are a studier and you want something and you're like, okay, I've reached the limit of, I've read the lists in Deadman, and yeah, you can always do more memorization. You need to get your hands on this book and start using that as a study tool. Hi, I'm Marie Hopkinson, and this is the Chinese Medicine Podcast. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking with Michael Brown about the book that he's translated. And this is a really, really good book if you're a student of Chinese medicine, if you are studying acupuncture, you're thinking about it, if you're an acupuncturist, you're a teacher, or you're just interested in Chinese medicine, or you just want to present someone who does Chinese medicine, this is a great book to get a hold of. So we're going to be talking about what's in the book and why it would be useful as a study tool. And also Michael's going to share how to use it as a study tool. Hi, I'm Marie Hopkinson. Welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. And today I'm joined by Michael Brown. And he's an acupuncturist and a Chinese herbalist. And he's also a book translator. And he's just recently worked on this book called Explanations of Channels and Points, Volume 1. So I'm assuming there might be a subsequent volume.
There will be a second volume coming.
Quite a substantial book. And what we're going to do today is we're going to just talk about his new book and talk about some of his journey to writing the book and some of the reasons why you might want to get a copy, or you hopefully you will want to get a copy of his book by the end of this. And so Michael's had some experience in studying acupuncture himself through Endeavour College. He did a bachelor's in acupuncture, and then he went on to do some study in translation at university or translation and Chinese language. And he's also got a master's degree from RMIT in Chinese herbal medicine. He's also spent a year in China studying and learning Chinese. Yeah. And it's just living the life. I love the Chinese life, living the Chinese life. And so we're going to talk about his book. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Marie.
Awesome. Okay, so who's this book for? Let's talk about that first.
So this book, I think it's definitely for students and practitioners.
Yep.
And I think it's for anyone who wants to really understand acupuncture and acupuncture points kind of before modern textbooks were formed.
Okay.
Because this book, we assume that, the latest that would have been written was 1693, which is when the author died. We don't actually know much about the author. We don't know. We know that he wrote a few of the other works, but not all of those were lost.
And who's the author, the original author?
A guy called Yuehan Zhen, and he lived, I think, from about 1602 to 1693, so quite a while. Mm-hmm. And he wrote quite a few other books as well. Some ones on, he wrote a treatise on cough, on acupuncture prescriptions. I think he wrote probably what we can assume is a discussion on some materia medica on herbs, and one on kind of the Ling Shu and the Neijing as well. Yeah. And now the reason why I think that this is a very good book for students and both practitioners, but I probably think for students coming through, it would be a really great kind of text to work with Deadman, because or Manual of Acupuncture rather, is that this book will tell you a lot about why an acupuncture point is called the name that it is. So the reason why I called it Explanations as well, which isn't like the character, you can probably argue, has a few meanings, is that because he goes through and he explains things for you. He explains why is this point called what it is, and then you look at it, and acupuncture functions are somewhat relatively new when you look at and you see spleen 9 transforms damp, or lung 10 clears heat, something like that. Those are relatively new. Some of the functions, in the old text, you would have what I would call function by category, which is where you have functions attributed to the 5 phase points as well.
Right.
So therefore the uniting points, or the Hersey points, they kind of clear counterflow and leakage as well. So that's a point category. That's a point function has defined by category. those points that actually have that function themselves has a point on themselves, but they have that point because they're
in that category. Yeah, right. And that would have been an easier way to learn it, maybe as well. Just rather than, because I know students get the Deadman Book and they're like, and it's a great textbook. I remember studying Chinese medicine, and I remember when Deadman came out, because firstly before that I was using that horrible yellow Chung book because that's all we had. And then when Deadman came out, wow, this is great. Like the just every instead of just having a weird little line, and you know, the anatomical pictures are great in there to sort of help you find where the points are. But then you're sort of bogged down with this. Well, do I need to memorize this list of functions? Exactly like what you said. And if you had that linked to a broader category, that makes memorization a lot more easier, right?
Well, what Yue Han Jen does is, this is it's kind of an interesting text as well, because it's a commentary on a text that's called the Mingtang Jing, or the Classic of the Bright Hall. And the Classic of the Bright Hall was one of 3 texts.
Bright Hall, as in what?
Bright Hall.
Oh, I thought it said whore.
No. Hall, okay. H-A-L-L.
Sorry. I'm glad we clarified that. I'll write that. Hall. Okay, yeah, sure.
And that was one of 3 texts that made up the what they call the Zhenju Jiayi Jing, or the Systematic Classic of Acupuncture, which was translated. And what we basically know is that text was made up of the Mingtang Jing, parts of the Su Wen, and parts of the Ling Shu as well, or the plain questions, or the Needle Classic, or the Divine Pivot, something spiritual pivot, whatever you want to translate that as. And so it was one of these 3 texts. And Huang Fu Mi, I think he was around like 220 to 300, something like that. I think Jin Dynasty. He was basically the first acupuncturist that said, I'm going to try and formulate the most important teachings of acupuncture and put them into combined work. And that's what the Systematic Classic is. And so I kind of almost argue that the Systematic Classic is almost like the Shanghan Lun of acupuncture, where it's the first text that we know who wrote it, we know who compiled it, and we know what really his purpose was for doing it. And he put it together, and he chose to include the Mingtang Jing points and the descriptions and the indications in it to me. So that's kind of where I think if you want to say, well, Shanghan Lun is the most important herbal book, and I think it's a valid argument. I think that you could make the same argument with this Mingtang Jing in conjunction with parts of the Ling Shu and the Su Wen, because the Mingtang Jing obviously had to have existed prior to when Huang Fu Mi incorporated it in as well. Right. So I think you can argue definitely it would be a Han Dynasty text as well. So around that time, but then it was also included in some other works as well, like I believe Sun Sum Yao's texts included parts of it, and another big formula work called the Wai Tai Mi Yao, which is sometimes called the Arcane Essentials of something like this, of the library or something like that. And then later it was included into most acupuncture texts as well.
Awesome.
Including its volumes 6 and 7 of the Zhenju Da Cheng, or the Great Compendium of Acupuncture and Moxibustion, of which I believe that 4 volumes have been translated by Chinese Medicine Database as well. So once again, if you want to read a little bit more about classical acupuncture, that's a good place to start, as well as
what place?
Chinese Medicine Database.
Okay, put the link below.
And they've done, I think, 4 or 5 texts out of the Zhenju Da Cheng, or the Great Compendium of Acupuncture and Moxibustion as well. They've also done, I think they translated it as like the Classic of Supplementing Life or Nourishing Life of Acupuncture as well, which is also another really good book, and they talk a fair bit about the Mingtang Jing in that as well.
Awesome.
So we have basically this commentator, Yue Han Jen, and he's writing this commentary of a Han Dynasty text. And now look, this was a very common practice among herbalists to write commentaries of the Shendong Bensao Jing, or the Divine Farmer's Materia Medica, which is kind of the earliest text on herbal medicine. But no one was doing it for acupuncture. No one would write a commentary on acupuncture. There's no other text like this that has existed in history. Well, herbal medicine just appeared to be more of like a scholarly medicine.
Okay.
Acupuncture had a fair few works, but they really just weren't as substantial as the herbal medicine. I mean, in China, herbal medicine was definitely the main medicine that you went to for really anything kind of like internal, external conditions or anything like that. Like acupuncture could still help with it, but here you tend to see people kind of associate Chinese medicine with acupuncture in the West. But in China, you associate herbalism with Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
Herbalism was always at the forefront.
Yeah.
And it's just, like probably the most important acupuncture texts, like probably an author like the guy I mentioned in the last video, Zhang Jiebin, like his complete works, like everything that author wrote, you could probably put all the famous acupuncture texts side by side with that as well.
Okay.
And that's kind of one author versus the most famous text throughout, the last kind of 800 years of acupuncture.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much written until this book really.
Okay.
And luckily, this book only survived, I think, because some people had a couple of scrolls of his writings,
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been lost.
Yeah.
And
is this the first translation into English?
yeah, yep. And even then, like you pick up Chinese history books in Chinese about the Chinese medicine, and no one mentions it as well, strangely. And I mean, to me, it's quite a fascinating book. And this is why I will explain it's good for students.
Yeah,
First off, it's the first book in history to number the points.
Okay.
So it actually numbers the points. And it pretty much follows them as we know them today. But, I then think, well, you go back.
Can I ask you a quick question then?
Yeah, sure.
Is it true that the points were numbered for Westerners?
I don't know whether or not that's the truth.
Is that just
I don't know if that's the truth or not. I think there might have been an element of that because it's harder for Westerners to know names.
So when he wrote this book, were Westerners coming into China around that time?
Maybe, but I don't think he would have been influenced by that.
Right, okay.
Because I mean, the thing is though, when you look at some of the points, there's an implicit numbering system in them. Okay, first off, the bladder 5 is called something like Wu Chu, which is 5th space.
Yeah.
There's the 5th space up on the head, right?
Yeah.
Large intestine 2 and 3 is Erjian and Sanjian, or 3rd and 2nd space as well. Maybe is that just relating to the space on their hand? Maybe, but maybe it's also, there might be something implicit there. But he was the first person to kind of run with it and number the points as well.
That's really interesting to know.
Yeah, so I mean, that basically people will say, well, numbering the points was the last 100 years. Well, I mean, I think it happened again, but this was the first person to do it.
Okay, cool.
And so another reason why he's really good is that he systematically breaks down diseases that each point treats. Because when you would read the old Mingtang Jing, it would just have like a disease, all over the place. You might have like a painful elbow, but then it might talk something about the stomach, then it might talk something about your nose or something, then you might have some sort of mania disease or something like that. Well, he basically breaks it down, usually what he calls, like he'll say, okay, you have lung points. So these are like heart disease of the lung or spleen disease of the lung. So he takes these big lists of indications and he breaks them down to you via kind of the 5 phase or Zhang. I think he's definitely thinking via 5 phase, but he's just using the Zhang as representation of that 5 phase, but he breaks it down for you like that. So you might think, okay, I've got, and even then you might not be able, like you're never going to be able to memorize this text. It's just, it's too vast. But when you're in clinic, you might think, it's just good to kind of remember reading something and you might think, okay, they have a problem with urination but they have coughing as well. I remember that there's a lung point that can treat that. Let me go back and find that as well. So you scan through the lung points, you're looking for kidney diseases of the lung as well, because it's related to urination. So then that helps you track that down a little bit as well. Or you might have someone where they have, like a metal and wood pattern as well. So you might be trying to think, okay, let's look at points on the lung channel that he believes that lung points on the channel that treat liver diseases as well.
Okay. Yep.
So then so then that helps you try and memorize it, because once you structure in that way, it no longer becomes a list. You're structuring it into your mind. You're putting it into certain sections, and you might just say, and it's even then, I remember lung 5 will also treat some kidney diseases or something like that. So that helps you structure it then. Now, the other really good thing about this book is then that he'll also try and explain to you, well, what's going on with this disease as well. He'll give you a little bit of commentary about it as well. He'll explain a little bit sometimes about why this point treats what it does. He'll explain a little bit about why this disease has also come about as well. He also might say, okay, when you have this disease, then this disease will follow as well. So that's why the diseases were paired together as well. So
it's much more of a classical approach, like that's similar to how herbal texts are. And so because some acupuncturists really never delve into something like a Shanghan Lun or something, because they think, well, there's not much acupuncture in there, so I won't even bother opening it, reading it. But that's how those kind of texts read, right?
And while there isn't much about acupuncture in like the Shanghai Lun, what it will teach you is it will teach you about the physiology of the body when it's under disease.
Yeah.
So even then it will help you actually understand the body and then how you might prescribe acupuncture.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
That and so I often tell students, like, just grin and bear it.
Yeah.
Because it's really good, useful information about the pathology. And if this is written in that same way, then that is very useful, because in a clinical sense, sometimes you go, okay, you made the diagnosis, let's say you give them the point, you go to Deadman, let's say, and you pick out your points, or whatever you use, you pick out your points. And then what next? What do you expect next? Well, if this book is kind of helping you understand that, that's really good for you as a clinician, because then the next time the patient comes in, you're going, oh, well, that's not going to be a surprise then, because you're thinking, well, this would be the natural progression of that illness, right? Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, I think...
Sorry, keep going.
No, it's fine. I think it's a good book as well, because, and I think it can be used in conjunction with Manual of Acupuncture, because what a lot of people don't use Manual of Acupuncture for is actually point combinations. And now, Manual of Acupuncture actually has the best list of point combinations that I've seen in either an English or Chinese book. Okay. Their list of point combinations is unbelievable. It's so thorough. And I actually had the opportunity to meet Mazen Al-Kafaji last year at our national conference. And I tried to ask him, was there a single book that you got all these lists from? And he said, no, he went through the Chinese books and compiled his own list. So, I mean, I don't want to say that this book should ever replace Manual of Acupuncture, because I think Manual of Acupuncture is a very important book in its own right. But I think that this should be used in conjunction for students to better understand the points as well.
Because what you don't have in here, just so people understand, is there's no pictures of where the points are, because that's what
there's one picture per channel.
Yeah, okay.
Which is at the start of each channel, but you only have the description of the point.
Yeah.
But I also think that can be a positive and a negative thing, because if you get I think it gives you sometimes for students, you need to follow where the teacher says that your point is.
Yep.
You have to do that.
Yep.
But I think at least when I get into clinic as well, sometimes I palpate the space a little bit more. And I feel like, I need to maybe angle it a little bit differently or move it slightly, maybe half a chun to one chun off as well. And so it allows, in my opinion, the points perhaps aren't as defined as they are now.
Yeah, not like this dot right here and the book said it's there, but then I feel like it's supposed to be... Yeah,
but that's important. But I think that's important, because it's this idea of learning to walk before you run.
Yes.
It's like this will give you the idea, and the point's probably going to be there 90% of the time. But then, as you get better, you might think, I'm not getting a reaction, and maybe I'll move it slightly over or something like that. Yeah. And I think that's fair enough to still kind of call it that point. But in my own clinic, I kind of have some points that I call bladder 40.5, gallbladder 20.5, because I'm working along that channel, but they're just not at that exact spot. But when I see it, I'll know that this is where I'm working as well. Okay. And I'm using those for a specific reason. Yeah. Now, another thing with this book is that some people have kind of complained that acupuncture has been maybe herbified. Sorry?
People complain. That's unusual, are they?
But they say that acupuncture has been herbified or something like that, or become herbal medicine with the functions of the points and things like that. And I mean, to me, I don't actually see that as a problem, because that was the development in herbal medicine. Herbs didn't come out really starting with functions, right? If anything, the functions of the 5 phases actually, the 5 transport points predated any functions with the herbs that they had, but rather later commentators added functions to herbs as well. And that's a little bit about what this book does. It's not as explicit as saying this point drains fire, but it will say things like you can drain, the heat from earth using the heat within earth using this metal point or something like that, or using the earth point on the metal channel, something like that, or moisten, the lungs by using the water point on the metal channel or something like that. So you have these kind of functional ideas. So people will say, no, acupuncture has been herbified the last 100 years. Well, once again, this book, to me, creates an argument that that's not the case, that it actually predates that, and it shows that the Chinese, they were happy to innovate the medicine as well. And awesome. I think sometimes it's okay, look, if you can only learn the function, that's better than learn nothing at all. But the indication generally surpasses the function. But if you can only learn the function, well, that's better, at least that, rather than just thinking, I think I'm going to needle, spleen 6, you
What do
still.
you mean by indication surpasses the function? You mean it's better to remember the indication?
Well, yes, because the functions are extrapolated via the indication, right?
Okay.
So if explain 6 helps with your period or something like that, or helps with menstrual blood or moving the blood or something like that.
That's the indication.
Well, that can be indication. So then you might say, okay, also, and maybe spleen 9 helps with like discomfort around the abdomen or bloating or distension, something like that. Then you say, oh, it clears dampness.
Yep. Yep.
So the function has been extrapolated via the indication,
Okay.
and it's the same thing that happens with herbs as well. And
So the first things probably noted down in text would have been indications.
absolutely, and you see that in the Divine
inferred
Farmers.
those functions out of that
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing that we see happen with kind of like in the classical formula school as well. They'll say, rather than perhaps you just treat necessarily Xiaoyang disease, which might be, like a kind of blurry vision, bitter taste, tinnitus, you actually then understand perhaps what is this pathomechanism that is happening within Xiaoyang disease as well. So it's an extrapolation based on indications as
Sure.
well.
Yeah.
And so I think that's fine, and I think that's good. But then if you can kind of know the original ideas behind those things, go that little bit deeper, that's good. And I think that's what this book will help with as well.
Okay.
So you kind of read it with lung 5 or something like that, where you've got Deadman beside you, and then you look at that and you look at the indications and you're trying to think, how did they form these functions by looking at these indications?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you're a student and you're sick of the just being spoon-fed something and you really want to know a bit more, then this sounds like this is the kind of acupuncture text you know to get your hands on. And especially if you are a studier and you want something and you're like, okay, I've reached the limit of I've read the lists in Deadman, and yeah, you can always do more memorization. You need to get your hands on this book and start using that as a study tool.
Well, I think it's a really, really good book for students who want to write a little bit more about why they're using points in their case studies.
Okay.
Because you can kind of like open it up, you can talk about the point, you can talk about the point name, you can talk about where it is on the body, and then you can talk about, well, I'm using it for this function, but we also see it's this indication, and Yue Han Jen says, well, then, this is the reason why this is happening in there as well. So it gives you, a nice kind of classical source to talk about your points in your case studies. Because often when I kind of see case studies, it's like, oh, Deadman, and I just use this point for this function. I think it might be allow you to have a little bit more of an intimate relationship with some of the acupuncture points, and even trying to, and what I think is important is that you just don't read the book, okay? What I really encourage people to do is try and read it and analyze why is he talking about what he's talking about, and how is he talking about this information, and when he extrapolates and talks about this information, can I then apply that same extrapolation method to a different point that he maybe didn't talk about? So he'll talk about sometimes about, using the, like the water point on the metal channel to moisten the lungs. Or can I use, then, well, do you use the fire point on the metal channel to clear heat?
Right.
Or to warm it if you tonify it as well? So, you don't just read something. You need to kind of understand the author's intention and why and how to extrapolate it and apply it in different situations and scenarios as well.
Yeah.
And that will help you, I think, further your understanding as a physician of Chinese medicine as well.
Yeah. And look, I can see another way you could use this book as well. Like, so I see students sometimes they come in, they do the case, they're unsure, but the teacher helps them, or supervisor helps them, and they say, okay, you're busy, and so that you end up getting a list of points, and you're like, okay, I've just got to go and need all these points because time's marching on, and whatever's happened, and then you could go home and you could go, well, why? Because that should be a question in your head. Why did my supervisor or teacher tell me to use? Especially if you don't know and you're thinking, what the hell? Why did they say use lung 5? Why did they say use stomach 36 or whatever? It might have, be not as simple as those points. You could get this book and you could read that and you could find, oh wow, okay, that's the reasoning why, like it does this, and why does it do that? Because I think if you go, like going back to the previous interview that we did talking about learning styles, one of the reasons I find students, and for me also why I don't learn things, like I learn things better when I understand why. And sometimes that's a big thing. And if you know why, then it's not just like, oh, you must, like there are some things in Chinese medicine where you just have to remember it, try to memorize it, and then you understand why maybe 10 years later. That's happened heaps of times to me. You're like, oh, that's why, and I understand now. But if you can try to be that person that's inquisitive and kind of understanding why, and I think this is great because before that, like there aren't I guess that's one of the reasons why you did this translation, because there aren't that many texts that explain why and give you that in-depth information.
Well, there are some texts, but then they'll talk about points, but they perhaps weren't written by Chinese people, and then they don't tell you where they got their information from as well. So this is kind of like, this is going back to, in my opinion, a great mind. When I read it, I was very, very impressed with how he wrote and explained things as well. And that's one of the reasons why I picked it. I want to pick, when I translate something, my thoughts are, is this going to really add something to, the future of Chinese medicine and to the Western studies as well? And I really feel like this point will make, a great difference to Chinese medicine practitioners, especially acupuncturists and students who want to go deeper and understand it. And I don't think that this is a book that you would memorize, but it's something that, if you're learning about lung patterns and you keep seeing lung 1, you keep seeing lung 5, or you keep seeing lung 9, or, you're learning about spleen patterns, you keep seeing spleen 3, spleen 6, spleen 9. Well, go back, let's just read that point and try and see what it means and see what they're talking about as well. And see how did they view this point in, classical Chinese medicine.
Yeah. And just so that people understand, like, Michael's got the Chinese there with each line, so you can see it. And so if you don't, if you're not sure, and or even if you're into translation yourself, or you want to learn a little bit about that, that is very handy, because you can go, right, this is what the Chinese is saying, this is what your translation is, and that can be a helpful tool later on. Like when I graduated Chinese medicine, I tried to learn to read Chinese. I did a whole year of sitting in my office trying to learn how to do it, and in the end I didn't learn how to read Chinese, but that was one thing that I used to do. I used to find books like this which had the Chinese in it, and then do my own, work out what it was, and it's just, that's so gold that you've put that in there, because it's good.
Well, it has a lot of good footnotes in it as well, some extra information about things where we thought was relevant to include as well. It's really good as well, because it also actually just doesn't have points. Why it's called Channels and Points is because it takes Ling Shu Chapter 10, or the Needle Classical Divine Spirit. That's called basically the treatise on channels, channel vessels or channels, the Jingmai, and in that it talks about basically how the original channels of acupuncture were formed, where the connections go through the body and everything like that. So you can talk a little bit about, you can read about the original pathways as well, and then how points situated upon there. And Yue Han Jen, he took basically a commentator called Ma Shi, and Ma Shi is a commentator that I like, and I don't actually think he gets enough recognition. He was the first person to write two full commentaries on both the books of the Neijing, the Su Wen and the Ling Shu. And he kind of took a lot of his explanations about the channels and the channel diseases as well. And then also about, they also write about the sinew channels as well. So you can kind of have a little bit of a read about that. So there's a lot of really cool, interesting information there as well. I just think, if you read too much of it, you'll get bogged down. So pick, a couple of points and that you've been maybe wanting to use in clinic, and read about them, and then kind of, even then, you might not remember everything, but you think, oh, I saw that patient with this, then this point comes into mind as well that you can use.
That's a really good tip of how to use it, because often, I'm a big believer in buying books, but I love book titles. I don't read every book that I buy. And so, sometimes you just get bogged down in, where do I start? I have to start from start to finish, but that's a great way to do it. And I think that also helps your learning if you have experienced something that day, and then you can go home and do a little, or even you might not even be in the student clinic yet, you might have just learned it in the class in a theoretical sense, right? And so if you can then go and learn that repeat that information that same day, then I forget the name of that learning curve, but there's a learning curve thing that says it's like you've got exponential growth of learning, and that's powerful, right? So this is another way to kind of do that. So awesome. All right, great. And so what made you want to translate this? Why'd you do that?
I started working on a few different bits and pieces, and I started originally translating commentary of the Shanghai Lun by a guy called Shu Ling Tai, and I don't know, I felt like I wasn't probably as familiar with the Shanghai Lun as I should have been, and it was kind of a method to learn it, but I just didn't feel like a strong connection with that text as I felt that I should have. And for me, I don't know, I'm kind of like a little bit of I like sometimes, like, I definitely don't read everything, but I like a lot of information, and I like to kind of go through old books. I like to read about old authors, see what they've written, and I like to look at the old books and see, well, what were they writing about? What was their writing style? Why were they writing about this? And then I kind of build up like a little bit of a kind of network in my head where it's like, well, if I want to know about this, I know he's written that. If I want to know about this, I know he's written that. And so it allows me, if I ever want to find information, I know where it is. I really like the text, but I just felt like it wasn't really for me. I might come back to it at a later point, but for me, I would read a lot of different texts of authors and see what they would read and see what they were writing about and see what topics they would write about, see how they wrote, and I would try and look at different acupuncture books as well. And so when I first saw this book, it was called, in Chinese, it's called the Jing Shui Jie, which is basically channels and points explanations. And it was quite interesting to me because very few acupuncture books include point in the title. I think if any other than this one. I'm not sure, but I don't think really any other book includes point in this. Up until recently they do now, but I'm talking pre-1911. Yeah, okay. I don't believe so. So that was a very unique feature. And then
you mean before that they just talked about channels?
Well, they would just have channels, or the points would be in a book about channels or a book about acupuncture. They just never included point in the channel. Okay. So this book, so I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Why are they including point in the title? And so then I went back and I had a look at it, and I'm like, wait a second, the numbering or the points in the index, is that actually how it was done in this old book? And the sources, the source of this book, they printed how it was done in the old books. Yeah, right. So I was like, well, wow, they're numbering these old books. He numbered the points. That's really interesting. And so then I went to have a look at Lung 5 because that was like the first point that I translated out of this book, and so I remember it.
It's your favorite point, isn't
it? Yeah, I really like it. And Chezi, and I was looking at it, and then he's like, oh, he's talking about the name of the point. Oh, well, that's interesting. I haven't seen anyone else do that. And then I look down and I see, oh, he's talking about lung diseases of the lung, heart diseases of the lung, spleen diseases of the lung. Well, that's really interesting. And I was like, well, that's a really interesting disease kind of model. I haven't seen that before. And I was speaking to a very, very nice scholar and very good practitioner called Leo Locke in America. And I said, Leo, tell me about this. What is this model? Have you seen it before? And he basically says, oh, well, during this period of time of the Ming and Qing dynasty, they were very influenced by this idea of the 5 evils. So this is where they kind of have like one phase and it kind of different phases invade. So, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I hadn't ever seen an acupuncture author write like that. So he then, categorized all the diseases, and then he wrote explanations of them as well. And so this is, I'd seen other commentaries of books, but I'd never seen an acupuncture commentary before, and I don't know why. I mean, there's a small caveat to that. Okay. There is a book called the Tai Su, which was a very early translation of the Suwen, something like 680 CE, okay? Yeah. And this author, Yang Shangshan, he also wrote a commentary on the Mingtang Jing, but we only had the scroll from the lung channel, because this text was lost in China and it was refound in a shrine in Japan in like 1810 or something like that. Wow. And so of the Tai Su, there are a couple of scrolls missing from that, but it's quite complete. But from the commentary on the Mingtang, we only have the lung channel. And so he wrote a commentary on it as well, explaining about the names and some of the diseases. But I don't believe Yue Henjian knew about this. So he kind of like almost reinvented or redid this like 1,000 years later with no knowledge that Yang Shangshan did this as well. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's interesting where you sometimes see like, like they say like, medicine, time is like a current and it repeats itself, So this was definitely one of these things that was lost, and because we found it, we now know that like, oh, this existed in the past. But I think he didn't have any of that knowledge. So he kind of pioneered and did it himself. Even if he wasn't technically the first, he's the only person that we have with this complete work now. Okay, right, wow. How interesting. Yeah. You must feel a bit like Indiana Jones. Look,
going through the scrolls and...
I really enjoy it. It was a lot of work, but I really, for me, it was really, I wanted to translate the whole book itself. I mean, the volume 1 is 7 channels, which is lung to bladder as per the channel pathways, and that's 470 pages.
It's a massive book.
It's big, you know, and I wanted to do it all, but then, you know, it still probably wouldn't be out. We'd probably be waiting another year, and it probably would have been like, you know, close to 1,000 pages. So I decided to just try and focus on doing half, and to me, it was kind of felt like that was something that I could manage, because when I was sitting at a you know, hundreds of pages of Chinese, sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming.
Of course, yeah.
But I was very lucky to have my editor, a guy called Alan Saw. He just helped me so much, and he corrected a lot of my errors, because, you know, like, look, it looks really good in there, and I translated everything first myself, but he, you know, he would go through and he'd say, well, this passage needs rewriting because, you know, he's reading it like this, and I trust him fully, and he, to me, help us release a book that I think, you know, there might be a couple of little errors in there, but will generally stand the test of time.
For sure.
In the Library of Chinese Medicine, and I'm very happy to be working as his editor in his book that he's translating as well, which is called the Jingyo Chanshu, and this book is really going to be great for early Chinese medicine students who want to learn about yin and yang, who want to learn about basically the 8 principles, because he'll talk about yin and yang, he'll talk about the exterior and interior problems, and he breaks it down for you as well. Because often people will think, I'm just going to deviate from the book a little bit, but they think the 8 principles, it must be exterior, must be interior. Well, okay, first off, is it in the interior, you have then the Fu interior and the Zhang interior. So you have like the yang within yin, and you have the yin within the yin, which is the Zhang organs are the yin organs. So then you have the yin within the yin. And then, so for example, on the exterior, you might have the skin, which is the yang of the yang, but then you might have the muscles, the flesh, and the bone, which are then the yin within the yang as well. So he teaches you to break it down, and then he also teaches you, well, it's not necessarily exterior or interior. The exterior might be hot, the interior might be cold. The interior might be hot, the exterior might be cold.
Yeah.
You know, you might have, you know, kind of these multiple things kind of going on at once. Or you might be excess up above but deficient below, or vice versa as well. So he really, you know, and that's the key understanding of the 8 principles, is that it's not one or the other. It's what's happening with this at this one time as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of something that sometimes students misunderstand. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I think they do think it's either or, and they get bogged down. I don't know. They can't, and because they probably can see that, but they just can't articulate. They don't know how to use that system to articulate that conundrum. Saying that, that's a great little. That was for free. That's a little sidebar.
I mean, that book's hopefully going to be coming out sometime this year. Volume 2 will hopefully be coming out towards the end of the year, if not very early next year. It depends how much
hard he works.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've done some parts of it, but basically, as we wrote this, we developed kind of like systems and ways when we approach things. This is how we translate it. So those ones were kind of translated earlier. So we basically need to go back and basically elevate it to the style that we feel comfortable releasing.
Yeah, awesome. And so this doesn't have all the channels in it. It's got
seven
channels.
So the next volume will then have the kidney, kidney, then pericardium, you know, liver, gallbladder, sanjiao, ren and du, and then it'll have then, because it already has the ren and du, then it has another 6 kind of small paragraphs on the other 6 extraordinary channels as well.
Awesome! Wow, cool, awesome. Well, this is enough to keep you busy.
Yeah. Look, if you get through that before the other one's out, then I commend you. And if you message me and say, Michael, when it's coming out, I might send you a sample or something like that.
And Michael also runs a blog for people that are interested in knowing about different translations and things that you're working on. So we'll put the link to that in the description below. And where can people get your book from?
So currently right now, it's only for sale on Amazon as well. And look, if you buy it from there and you like it, please leave a review as well. Everything always helps as well. And if you have questions about it as well, or you're unsure of something, then I'm happy for you guys to contact me. I believe Marie will put my contact details below as well. And there's also been articles for this in the Lantern and the Journal of Chinese Medicine. So please support both of those publications, because they really help support the medicine as well.
Yeah, but this is great because like there's lots of people that just write a book with a catchy title, 5 ways to five easy points.
5 ways to needle a monkey or something.
Something like that. And this is not one of those books. And what's great about it is it's adding to, like what you said, it's something that's going to stand the test of time, and it's adding to it's just adding to the I don't know, to the richness of Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
And we're lucky and fortunate that you've done this, and so thank you so much for doing that for our profession,
My pleasure.
for our patients, for the benefit of mankind.
Yeah. I think if you had this book along with the Manual of Acupuncture, Wang Juyi's Applied Channel Theory, another one called The 5 Transport Points by Yang Wei Jie, or something, or however other people write his name. He is a student of Tongue, but he wrote a really good book on the 5 transport points as well. I think, if you have these books, you'll have a really good kind of classical foundation for the medicine, intertwined with modern interpretation and understanding.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and
My
sharing
pleasure, Marie.
about this book. And what I really love about doing this and talking about this is, for someone like me, I live in a place where we don't even have a Chinese medicine bookshop. It sounds like I live in a backwater place at Perth. We don't.
And same in Brisbane. We don't have one in Brisbane.
Right.
We just have, I think we had a bookshop at the campus.
So we're basically at the mercy of ordering something online. And I've even been to bookshops, because I've gone to Sydney to the bookstores, and these kind of books will be in the bloody plastic or something, and you can't even open it and see what's in it. And so, like, I would happily buy books, and especially knowing, like, if if you know what's inside it, and if it's going to be beneficial to you. So now, hopefully, this is enough information for you to make a good decision and know that it's going to be beneficial to you. If you're in a college or something like that, make sure you hit up your librarian to get this book in your college, because it needs to be in every college that's teaching Chinese medicine, teaching acupuncture. You can find all Michael's links in below, and he also sees patients when he's not busily translating Chinese language. He sees patients in his clinic, and so we'll put the link to his clinic below. So if you're in Brisbane, his clinic's in Chermside, right?
Correct.
Yep. And so thank you so much for being here and giving up your time.
Oh, my pleasure, Mary.
And for all the people listening and watching today, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can click the link below, and you'll be the subscribe button. You click that. If you're listening to us on Google or on iTunes, something like that, then make sure you go in there and leave a review if you like this content, because that helps other people to find this content as well. And if you've got a comment about this book or a question about this book, you can put that in the description below, and I'll make sure Michael gets to know that. So if you have read this book, or you want to make sure you go onto Amazon and leave a review about the book. And tell him how great it is, and that you thank him for writing it, because it's a labour of love doing this. It is truly, and
look, if your partner isn't a Chinese medicine practitioner, just buy it for them anyway, and then you can use it for a birthday present or something like that. Find any excuse to buy it.
Right? Okay. Buy it for someone that doesn't do Chinese medicine.
Yeah. And then they might give it back to you if you weren't going to buy it.
Yeah, right. So if you want it for yourself, buy it for yourself, for your partner, and then you get the benefit of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. That's how it's done. Right, awesome.
That's the key to successful marriages.
Oh, okay. The next episode, we're going to be talking about marriage with Michael. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again on the next episode soon. All right. You know what I want to do real quickly is just do a really quick